She was dying of cold until rancher number 13 opened the door. Snow lay in deep layers across the fields, muffling all sound and turning the world into a quiet, frozen white expanse. In the middle of this harsh winter, Maria was struggling to keep moving. Her car had broken down miles away from the nearest town, and the cold was creeping into her bones with a relentless determination. She could feel her fingers stiffening inside her gloves, her toes growing numb despite the thick socks and boots she had worn. Each breath she took came out as a cloud, sharp and biting, reminding her of the dangerous cold surrounding her. Maria had not planned to be out in the storm. She had been traveling to visit a distant relative, someone she hadn't seen in years. It was meant to be a simple journey, an ordinary drive along winding country roads, but life had other plans. The engine had sputtered and died just as the sun had disappeared behind the horizon, leaving her alone in a wilderness of snow and shadow. She tried to start the car again and again, but it was no use. Panic began to creep in, threatening to overwhelm her. Her phone battery was nearly dead, and there were no signs of life anywhere. No other vehicles, no houses, no distant lights. Just her, the snow, and the unforgiving cold. At first, Maria tried to keep calm. She wrapped her coat tighter around her and reminded herself to think logically. She knew that wandering off into the snow without a plan could be dangerous, yet the thought of staying in the car and slowly freezing terrified her even more. Her eyes scanned the endless white fields, searching for anything that could offer hope. It was then that she noticed a faint flicker of light far in the distance. At first, she thought it was a trick of her exhausted eyes, a small illusion caused by the way the snow reflected what little light remained. But as she squinted, she realized it was real, a small, steady glow in the darkness, almost like a candle fighting against the storm. With a mix of hope and desperation, Maria forced herself to move toward the light. Each step was a struggle. The snow was deep, and with each footfall, her boots sank almost ankle-deep, making her muscles ache with the effort. The wind whipped around her, trying to push her back, but she kept going. She focused on the faint glow ahead, imagining the warmth of a fire, a roof over her head, and someone who could help her survive this night. The storm was relentless, and at times she had to stop and brace herself against the wind, feeling the cold seep through even the thick layers of clothing. Her cheeks and nose were numb, her eyelashes frosted over, but she refused to give up. As she moved closer, Maria could make out more details of what the light was coming from. It was a small house, modest but sturdy, standing alone in the middle of the snow-covered land. The windows glowed warmly and smoke rose gently from a chimney, disappearing into the night sky. She felt a surge of relief that brought tears to her eyes. She had found safety, at least for the moment. Her pace quickened, though the cold made her legs heavy and slow. She stumbled over hidden drifts of snow, her hands clumsily trying to keep her balance. Every step closer to the house was a battle against exhaustion and the bitter winter wind. Finally, she reached the front of the house. It was simple, with weathered wooden panels and a small porch, but it radiated a sense of life and warmth in a world that had been harsh and unforgiving only moments before. Maria pounded on the door with numb hands, the sound muffled by the snow and wind, but enough to announce her presence. She hoped desperately that someone would hear her, that there was someone inside who could help her before the cold took a stronger hold. Her body was shaking uncontrollably now, not just from the cold but also from fear and relief. She clutched her coat tightly around her, feeling it doing little to protect her from the icy night. For what felt like an eternity, there was no answer. The silence outside the house was overwhelming. She wondered if she had imagined the light, if maybe she was too late, if the house had been abandoned. The snow kept falling, thick and unyielding, piling around her feet, threatening to trap her in place. Maria's teeth chattered uncontrollably and she hugged herself, wishing she had more layers, more warmth, more time. Just when despair began to creep back in, a shadow appeared behind the frosted glass of the door. A figure was moving toward her, and her heart leapt with hope. The door opened slowly, revealing a man standing in the doorway. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face that told stories of long winters and hard work. His eyes, however, were kind, calm, and steady. For a moment, Maria could hardly speak, her lips too numb and trembling to form words. The man didn't ask questions. He simply stepped aside and gestured for her to come inside. Relief flooded her as she entered the warm interior of the house, leaving the cold and storm behind. The first breath of warmth felt like magic, like life itself returning to her frozen body. She sank onto a chair near the fireplace, feeling her muscles relax for the first time in hours. He handed her a thick blanket, and she wrapped herself in it, feeling the fabric absorb some of the icy chill still clinging to her. Then he offered her a cup of steaming tea, the aroma soothing and comforting. Maria held the cup with both hands, letting the heat seep into her fingers and palms, feeling a sense of safety and security she hadn't felt all night. The man didn't say much, but his presence was enough. There was something about the quiet confidence in the way he moved, the simple, unassuming way he offered help, that made Maria feel protected. As she sat there, recovering slowly, she thought about how close she had come to being lost in the storm. Every detail of the journey, the freezing wind, the blinding snow, the aching muscles, the fear of the unknown, came rushing back to her. But now she also felt gratitude. Gratitude for the tiny flicker of light she had seen, gratitude for the man who had opened the door without hesitation, and gratitude for the warmth and safety she now felt. That night she realized how fragile life could be, and how a single act of kindness could make the difference between despair and hope. Maria stayed by the fire, wrapped in the blanket, sipping her tea slowly. The storm outside continued, but inside she felt a sense of peace. She didn't know who the man was, or why he lived in such a remote place, but she knew that his presence had saved her life. And in that moment, Maria understood something essential about humanity, that even in the coldest, darkest nights, there could be warmth, light, and kindness waiting just over the horizon. Hours passed as she gradually regained strength, each sip of tea and moment of warmth helping her feel more like herself. The fear of the storm began to fade, replaced by a quiet appreciation for the small, vital comforts around her. She looked out the window at the snow-covered land and realized that, though the world could be harsh and unforgiving, it could also hold miracles in the form of a kind stranger, a warm fire, and a safe place to rest. And she promised herself that she would never forget this night, nor the man who had been her lifeline in the storm. The morning came slowly, spilling pale light across the snow-covered landscape. Outside, the storm had finally begun to calm, leaving the world glistening in frozen white. Maria woke to a quiet, almost magical silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden house settling and the soft crackle of the fire. She had spent the night wrapped in the thick blanket, and for the first time in hours, she felt almost human again. Her body was still sore from the struggle through the snow, and her fingers and toes were just beginning to regain sensation, but she was alive, and the warmth around her made every ache a little easier to bear. As she sat by the fire, Maria's mind wandered back over the previous night. She remembered the wind cutting at her skin, the fear that had gnawed at her as she stumbled through the endless snow, and the near despair she had felt when no houses appeared. Then she thought of the light she had seen in the distance, the tiny beacon that had pulled her through the blizzard, and of the man who had opened the door. His quiet strength and calm presence had given her hope when she had almost lost it completely. She realized that his help had not been ordinary. It had been extraordinary, simple yet powerful. Maria knew she had to move on eventually. Her journey was not over, and she had promised herself she would reach her relatives' home. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe and recover. The man, whom she still did not know well, moved around the house with quiet efficiency. He stoked the fire, prepared a simple breakfast, and carried on as though life had always been this way, difficult but manageable. There was something comforting in his routine, something that spoke of experience, resilience, and an understanding of the land that only years of living in such isolation could bring. As breakfast was served, a modest meal of bread, warm milk, and freshly boiled eggs, Maria learned a little more about him. He was called Rancher Number 13 by locals, a nickname that had stuck because of the number on his property, and because of a reputation he had quietly built over many years. He rarely spoke of himself, but Maria could sense the depth of his life through the way he moved, the way he spoke, and the way he treated her. There was a quiet dignity in him, a simple honesty that made her feel safe. She noticed the walls of the house, decorated not with expensive art but with photographs of animals, fields, and moments captured over a lifetime. Every detail seemed to tell a story of hard work, dedication, and an intimate connection to the land. After breakfast, Maria decided she needed to step outside and see the world around the ranch. The storm had left everything blanketed in snow, sparkling in the weak morning sun. The trees were coated with frost, their branches heavy with the weight of ice, and the field stretched endlessly, unbroken and pure. Each step she took in the fresh snow made a satisfying crunch, and the cold air, though still sharp, felt invigorating now that she was stronger. The ranch itself was small but well kept, with fences standing straight and strong, a small barn in the distance, and a few animals moving quietly through the snow. Maria realized that this place was not just a house but a home, a sanctuary shaped by years of care and attention. Rancher Number 13 watched her from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. He offered to show her around, and Maria accepted, curious about the life that had sheltered her during the storm. They walked slowly, stepping carefully to avoid slipping on icy patches. He explained how he maintained the property, cared for the animals, and survived the harsh winters that came without warning in these parts. His voice was calm, steady, and patient, each word carrying experience and wisdom. Maria listened intently, fascinated not only by the practical knowledge he shared, but by the stories of resilience hidden between the lines. As they walked, Maria began to ask questions about the ranch, about the man's life, and about how he had come to live in such isolation. He told her that he had inherited the property from his parents, who had taught him the ways of the land from a young age. Over the years, he had learned not only how to survive, but how to thrive in a place where the weather could be both beautiful and deadly. He had learned to respect the land, to read its signs, and to prepare for storms before they arrived. Maria realized that his life, though quiet and seemingly simple, required courage, intelligence, and a kind of strength that few people understood. While walking near the barn, Maria saw the animals that were part of the ranch. There were a few cows, some chickens, and a couple of horses, all appearing healthy and well cared for despite the harsh winter conditions. She noticed the way the rancher moved among them, his touch gentle, his voice soft. The animals responded to him with trust and calm, and Maria could see why. He had not only provided them shelter and food, but had treated them with respect, recognizing that they, too, were living beings deserving of care and attention. Watching him, she understood that kindness could take many forms. Sometimes it was words, sometimes it was actions, and sometimes it was the quiet diligence of a life lived with purpose. The day passed slowly, with Maria gradually regaining her strength. They shared stories, sometimes light and funny, sometimes serious and reflective. She learned about the challenges of life in such a remote area, about winters that could trap people for days, and about moments of quiet joy that made the hardships worthwhile. The rancher shared stories of travelers he had helped in the past, people who had been lost, stranded, or struggling just as she had been. Each story seemed to reinforce the lesson Maria had already learned, that human kindness, even in the smallest acts, could be life-changing. As evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, reflecting off the snow and giving the world a surreal, magical glow. Maria felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and peace. Her muscles were tired, her body still sore from the previous night, but her mind was lighter. She had experienced fear, cold, and desperation, but she had also experienced warmth, safety, and hope. She realized that sometimes life could change in an instant. One moment she had been shivering in the snow, and the next she had been wrapped in a blanket by a fire, cared for by a stranger who had become a guardian in her moment of need. That night, as they settled in for a quiet evening, Maria felt a sense of gratitude deeper than anything she had known before. She had been reminded of how fragile life could be, and of how courage and compassion could come from unexpected places. She also realized something else, that people like Rancher Number 13 were rare, not because they were extraordinary in the way society often defines it, but because they were willing to act with kindness without expecting anything in return. It was a lesson she knew she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Before going to bed, Maria took one last look outside. The snow-covered fields glimmered under the moonlight, and the world seemed peaceful and still. For the first time since the storm had begun, she felt hope. She knew the journey ahead would still be challenging, but she also knew that she had experienced something that would give her strength for whatever came next. And she knew that, no matter how cold or difficult the world could be, there were still places where warmth, kindness, and humanity could be found, places that could save a life, just as the ranch had saved hers. She fell asleep that night with a sense of safety, gratitude, and quiet wonder. The storm outside had passed, but its memory remained, a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of compassion. Maria understood that sometimes the simplest acts, a door opened, a blanket offered, a cup of tea, could mean everything. And in the silence of that snowy night, she felt a deep connection not only to the rancher who had saved her but to the world itself, fragile yet capable of remarkable kindness. The following morning began quietly. The ranch bathed in soft light that spilled over the snow-covered land. Maria awoke feeling more rested than she had in days, though her body still carried the stiffness and soreness from the stormy night she had survived. She stretched carefully, aware of how much energy she had expended the previous day trying to reach the distant light that had saved her life. As she looked around the cozy room, she noticed small details she hadn't seen the day before. The way the sunlight hit the wooden beams, the neat arrangement of pots on the stove, and the photographs on the walls showing life on the ranch over the years. Each detail told a story of care, routine, and a quiet love for the land that had been nurtured by the man who had taken her in. Rancher Number 13 was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing breakfast with calm precision. Maria watched him move around the small kitchen, noting the ease and familiarity in every action. There was no rush, no panic, just the steady rhythm of someone who had lived through countless winters and knew exactly what needed to be done. He prepared a simple meal, hot porridge with a drizzle of honey, fresh bread, and a few pieces of fruit he had kept safe from the frost. The aroma filled the room, and Maria felt her stomach rumble in response, reminding her how little she had eaten while struggling through the snowstorm. As they sat down to eat, Maria finally found her voice. I can't thank you enough for what you did," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though not from the cold this time. "I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't seen your light." He nodded slowly, his face calm and kind. "You would have survived," he said simply. "You kept moving and you didn't give up. That's what saved you. I just gave you a place to rest." Maria shook her head, insisting, "No, it was more than that. You didn't have to open your door for me. You didn't have to care, but you did. You saved my life." He offered a small smile and said, "Sometimes that's all it takes. One small act can make the difference between despair and hope. You did your part by making it here. I just helped you along the way." Maria could feel a warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and awe. There was something in the way he spoke, modest yet confident, that made her respect him instantly. She realized that this man, who lived alone in a remote ranch, had a depth of character that few people could claim. His life, shaped by the harshness of winter and the isolation of the land, had forged in him a kind of quiet strength and unwavering kindness that Maria found both comforting and inspiring. After breakfast, he suggested they go outside. "There's work to do," he said. "And there's much to see. You'll need to know what the land is like if you're going to travel safely again." Maria nodded, curious and eager to understand more about the life that had sheltered her. She wrapped herself in her warmest coat and followed him out into the sparkling morning light. The snow stretched endlessly around them, pristine and untouched except for the tracks they left behind. The wind had softened, but it still carried a sharp chill that nipped at their faces and fingers. As they walked, the rancher began to explain the rhythms of life on a place like this. He spoke of the importance of feeding the animals before the cold became too intense, of checking the fences regularly to prevent damage from snow and ice, and of preparing food and supplies to last through storms that could trap them for days. Maria listened attentively, fascinated by the careful planning and foresight required to live in such isolation. She began to see that his life, though quiet, was full of purpose and discipline, a delicate balance between survival and care for all that depended on him. When they reached the barn, Maria saw the animals up close. The cows stood quietly, their breath misting in the cold air, while a few chickens pecked at the ground, searching for scraps beneath the snow. A horse stamped its hooves, sending little clouds of snow swirling into the air. The rancher moved among them with ease and confidence, checking each animal for signs of illness or discomfort. He spoke to them softly, calling their names and offering gentle strokes. Maria watched, realizing that his kindness was not limited to humans. It extended to every living being under his care, a reflection of a deep understanding of life's fragility and value. She reached out tentatively to touch the horse, and it nuzzled her hand as if sensing her warmth and gratitude. The rancher smiled. "Animals are honest," he said. "They know who you are and what you mean. Treat them well and they'll respond in kind." That's something you can carry into life with people too. As the morning wore on, Maria asked more questions about the rancher's life. He told her about winters when snowdrifts had blocked the roads for days, about travelers he had helped who had lost their way, and about moments of quiet joy, watching a sunrise over the frozen fields, hearing the soft call of a bird in the snow, or feeling the warmth of a fire. After a long, cold day, each story painted a picture of resilience and humility, of a man who had learned to face life's challenges without complaint and to find beauty in the simplest of moments. Maria began to feel a connection growing between them, a sense of trust and respect. She realized that meeting this man had changed her perspective. The world, which had seemed so harsh and unforgiving during the storm, suddenly appeared capable of kindness and generosity. She thought about how close she had come to losing hope and how a single act of compassion, opening a door, offering warmth, giving shelter, had transformed her life in an instant. As they continued to walk around the property, the rancher showed her the boundaries of the land, the hidden paths through the trees, and the small creek that ran behind the barn. The ice had frozen it into delicate shapes, sparkling in the sun, and Maria could hear the faint trickle of water beneath the surface. She marveled at the beauty around her, realizing that even in a place so isolated, life had its rhythms, its wonders, and its lessons. The rancher's quiet voice guided her, pointing out details she might have missed, explaining the importance of observing the land and respecting its power. By midday, they returned to the house. Maria had learned more than she had expected about survival, kindness, resilience, and the strength that comes from living in harmony with nature. She felt stronger, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. The fear that had dominated her thoughts during the storm had faded, replaced by a sense of calm, confidence, and hope. She knew that the journey ahead would still be challenging, but she felt ready to face it, armed with knowledge, gratitude, and the memory of the man who had saved her life. As the afternoon passed, Maria and the rancher settled near the fireplace once again. He offered her more tea, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup, savoring the comfort it brought. They spoke quietly, sharing thoughts and reflections on life, hardship, and the moments that shaped them. Maria realized that she had not only been given shelter from the storm, but had also gained insight into a way of life that was simple, meaningful, and deeply connected to the world around it. That evening, as the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, Maria stood at the window and looked out at the snow-covered fields. The world seemed peaceful, almost magical, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived the storm, thanks to the kindness of a man who lived quietly and purposefully in the wilderness. She knew that she would carry the memory of this place, this night, and this man with her for the rest of her life. As darkness fell and the stars began to sparkle in the clear winter sky, Maria felt a sense of calm and safety she had not known in a long time. She understood that the storm had been both a test and a test of her strength, resilience, and courage, and a gift in the form of the rancher's kindness, the warmth of his home, and the lessons she had learned about life and humanity. In the quiet of the ranch, surrounded by snow, fire, and gentle companionship, Maria felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to the rancher, and to the simple, powerful acts of compassion that can change a life forever. That night she went to bed with a heart full of hope and gratitude. She had faced fear, cold, and uncertainty, but she had also experienced warmth, kindness, and understanding. And she knew that, as she continued her journey, she would never forget the man who had opened his door to her, the land that had sheltered her, and the quiet power of a life lived with care, courage, and compassion. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the snow-covered fields, casting a soft golden glow across the ranch. The world outside sparkled, every branch and fence post covered in glistening frost, and the gentle light made the snow look almost magical. Maria woke to the quiet sounds of the ranch, cows softly lowing in the barn, the distant clucking of chickens, and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards as the rancher moved about his morning chores. She stretched, feeling the warmth of the blanket around her and a renewed energy coursing through her body. For the first time since the storm, she felt strong, safe, and ready to face the day. Breakfast was simple but hearty, as it had been the previous days. Warm porridge with honey, fresh bread, and a few pieces of fruit filled her stomach and warmed her from the inside. The rancher, calm and patient as ever, moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, preparing their meal and making sure everything was in order. Maria noticed the rhythm of his movements, the way he handled each task without hurry but with purpose. She realized that this calm, steady approach was not just a habit, it was a reflection of a life shaped by experience, patience, and a deep understanding of the world around him. After breakfast, the rancher suggested they take a walk through the surrounding fields. Maria eagerly agreed, curious to see more of the land that had saved her life. As they stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled her lungs, invigorating and refreshing. The snow crunched beneath their boots, each step leaving a clear imprint in the otherwise untouched landscape. Maria felt a deep appreciation for the quiet beauty around her, the way the sun caught the ice on the branches, the soft shadows that danced across the snow, and the distant hills that rolled gently toward the horizon. It was a world of stark contrasts, harsh in its cold, yet breathtakingly beautiful. As they walked, the rancher began to share stories of his life. He spoke of winters harsher than this one, when snow had piled so high that even the animals struggled to find their way. He told her about travelers he had helped over the years, people who had become lost, stranded, or frightened by storms. Each story carried lessons, not just about survival, but about courage, kindness, and the strength of the human spirit. Maria listened closely, absorbing every word, realizing that this man's life, though simple, was filled with meaning and depth. He spoke of the importance of preparation and observation. "The land tells you what's coming," he explained. "The wind, the clouds, the way the snow falls, they all have messages. You learn to read them and you learn to respect them. That's what keeps you safe." Maria nodded, understanding that survival in such a place was not just about strength, but also about knowledge, patience, and attentiveness. Every detail mattered, every decision had consequences, and every act of care could make the difference between life and death. They reached the barn, where the animals were waiting for their morning feeding. The cows looked up as they approached, their eyes calm and trusting. The chickens moved about, pecking at the ground, while the horse stamped its hooves, eager for attention. The rancher moved among them with ease, checking each animal for signs of discomfort or illness, speaking to them softly and offering gentle strokes. Maria watched in awe, noticing the trust and respect between the rancher and the animals. She realized that this was a form of communication, a bond built over years of care, attention, and understanding. It was a lesson in patience, empathy, and responsibility, one that she would carry with her long after leaving the ranch. Maria asked the rancher why he had chosen to live so far from town, in a place so isolated. He paused, looking out over the fields before answering. "There's peace here," he said quietly. "The world can be harsh, busy, and unforgiving. Out here, you learn to face life directly. You learn to survive, to care, and to find joy in the small things. It's not easy, but it's honest." Maria considered his words, realizing that his life, though difficult, was deeply meaningful. She had always thought of safety and comfort as something found in convenience and society. But now, she understood that true strength and fulfillment could be found in connection, with the land, with animals, and with other people. As they walked further, the rancher showed her a hidden trail through the trees, a path that led to a small creek. The ice had formed intricate patterns along the edges of the water, sparkling in the sunlight. Maria bent down, watching the gentle flow beneath the frozen surface. "It's beautiful," she whispered, amazed at the delicate artistry of nature. The rancher nodded. "Life finds a way, even in the coldest, hardest places," he said. "You just have to pay attention and respect it." Maria realized that this lesson applied not only to the land but to her own life. Even in moments of fear, uncertainty, or despair, there was always a way forward if one stayed aware, patient, and hopeful. As the day wore on, they returned to the house and warmed themselves by the fire. Maria felt a growing sense of gratitude and trust. She realized that her life had been changed not only by the warmth and safety she had found, but also by the presence of the rancher himself. His quiet strength, patience, and unwavering kindness had taught her more about humanity than she could have imagined. She thought about the storm, the fear she had felt, and the relief when she had finally reached the ranch. Each memory reminded her of how fragile life could be and how powerful simple acts of compassion were. The rancher shared more of his personal experiences. He spoke of times when he had been alone in the middle of winter, caring for his animals, facing shortages of food or fuel, and navigating the challenges of isolation. He spoke of the joy he found in small victories, repairing a fence, guiding a lost traveler, or simply witnessing a beautiful sunrise over the snow-covered fields. Maria listened intently, realizing that his contentment came not from wealth, comfort, or recognition, but from living in harmony with his values, the land, and the life around him. It was a profound lesson in finding meaning in simplicity. By evening, the sky had turned shades of deep purple and gold, reflecting off the snow in a breathtaking display. Maria and the rancher sat quietly near the fireplace, enjoying the calm and warmth after the day's work. She realized that the night would be coming soon, bringing with it another long, cold winter evening, but she felt no fear. She had learned courage, patience, and hope. She had experienced kindness when she had needed it most, and she had witnessed resilience and wisdom that would stay with her forever. As darkness settled over the ranch, Maria reflected on her journey. She thought about the storm, the loneliness, and the fear she had felt. She thought about the faint light in the distance and the man who had opened the door without hesitation. And she thought about the lessons she had learned since then, about the importance of preparation, observation, kindness, and patience. She realized that the storm had been more than a challenge. It had been a turning point, a moment that had revealed the strength and goodness that could exist even in the harshest circumstances. That night, Maria went to bed with a heart full of gratitude and reflection. The rancher had not only provided shelter from the storm, but had offered her something far more valuable, a sense of connection, understanding, and hope. She understood that human kindness could take many forms, from a warm blanket to a patient conversation, and that it could change a life in ways that were impossible to measure. She knew that as she continued her journey, she would carry these lessons with her, guiding her through challenges and reminding her that even in the coldest, loneliest moments, warmth and compassion could be found. Maria drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, the crackling fire beside her, the snow-covered fields outside, and the quiet presence of the rancher nearby. She had survived fear, cold, and despair, but she had also discovered courage, hope, and humanity. And in that quiet winter night, she understood something she would never forget, that even in the harshest conditions, life could offer moments of extraordinary kindness, warmth, and connection. Morning arrived gently, the first light of the sun spilling over the snow-covered fields and turning the world into a sparkling wonderland. Maria awoke with a sense of calm that she had not felt in a long time. The storm that had nearly claimed her life was far behind, and the warmth of the ranch, the fire, and the presence of the rancher filled her with comfort. She stretched slowly, feeling the strength returning to her muscles, the circulation returning to her fingers and toes, and a renewed sense of hope in her heart. For the first time since the journey began, she felt truly ready to face the day. Breakfast was quiet and simple. The rancher prepared hot porridge, fresh bread, and a few fruits he had kept safe from the frost. Maria ate slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through her body with each bite. As she looked around the kitchen, she noticed the details of the house more clearly than ever before. The worn wooden table, the neatly stacked firewood, the photographs of animals and landscapes on the walls, and the small trinkets that told stories of a life lived with care and attention. Each item reflected the quiet dignity of the rancher's life, a life that had sheltered her when she was at her most vulnerable. After breakfast, Maria knew she could not stay forever. She had a journey to continue, and she had promised herself she would reach her relative's home. Yet leaving the ranch was not easy. She had grown attached to the place, to the calm strength of the man who had saved her, and to the small, intimate world of the ranch that seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. She felt a mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and admiration. This man, living alone in the wilderness, had offered her safety without question, warmth without expectation, and kindness without limit. The rancher noticed her hesitation and smiled quietly. "It's time for you to continue," he said gently. "You've regained your strength and the road ahead is safer now. But remember what you've learned here about patience, observation, and kindness. Carry that with you." Maria nodded, understanding that his words were not just advice but a gift. They were lessons that would guide her through life, not just through the journey she was about to resume. She wrapped herself in her coat, tightened her boots, and stepped outside. The snow glistened under the morning sun, the fields stretching endlessly before her. She took a deep breath, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs and invigorate her spirit. Before leaving, she turned to the rancher. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You saved my life. You gave me hope when I had almost none. I will never forget this." He shook his head modestly. "You don't need to thank me. I did what anyone would do. Just remember to help others when you can. That's all the thanks I need." Maria smiled, a mixture of relief and admiration in her expression. She had encountered many people in her life, but few had shown such quiet strength and humility. This man, rancher number 13, had given her more than safety from a storm. He had given her a lesson in humanity. She felt a renewed determination to carry this kindness forward, to ensure that the world could continue to offer hope and warmth to those who needed it. As she began her journey down the snow-covered road, she glanced back at the ranch one last time. The house stood quietly, smoke rising gently from the chimney, the surrounding fields pristine and peaceful. It was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of simple acts of compassion. Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that her life had been changed forever by this encounter. The road ahead was still challenging. Snowdrifts remained and the wind carried a lingering chill, but Maria felt prepared. She had learned to be observant, to respect the power of nature, and to carry hope in her heart. Every step she took was guided by the lessons of the ranch and the memory of the man who had saved her. She moved carefully, adjusting her pace to the terrain, aware of the beauty around her as well as the challenges. Each breath was a reminder of survival, resilience, and the warmth that human kindness could provide. Along the way, Maria thought about the night she had almost succumbed to the cold. She remembered the panic, the numbness, and the fear that had made every step a struggle. And she remembered the light in the distance, the door that had opened, and the blanket that had wrapped her in warmth. Those memories, once terrifying, now filled her with gratitude and awe. She realized that life could be fragile, but it could also offer extraordinary moments of hope and care. As the hours passed, Maria felt stronger and more confident. She navigated the snowy roads with care, using the lessons she had learned on the ranch to guide her. She noticed signs of wildlife, observed changes in the snow, and adjusted her path to avoid hidden dangers. The journey was still difficult, but she faced it with a calm determination she had never known before. The fear that had once threatened to overwhelm her had been replaced by resilience, courage, and a deep appreciation for life itself. Even as she traveled, she thought about the rancher and the animals he cared for. She pictured the cows in the barn, the horse stamping its hooves, the chickens pecking in the snow, and the quiet strength of the man who had guided her through the storm. These images reminded her that life was full of small acts that could make a profound difference. A door opened at the right moment, a blanket offered, a cup of tea shared. These were simple gestures, yet they held the power to change the course of a life. As the day turned to evening, Maria finally saw signs of civilization in the distance. Smoke rose from chimneys, lights glowed warmly in the windows, and the roads were clearer. Relief washed over her, mingling with the lessons and gratitude she carried from the ranch. She had faced fear, cold, and uncertainty, but she had also experienced warmth, kindness, and hope. She realized that these experiences would stay with her forever, shaping the way she saw the world and the way she moved through it. When she finally arrived at a small town, Maria felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. She had survived the storm, the harsh cold, and the long journey. But more importantly, she had been transformed by the encounter at the ranch. She had learned the value of courage, patience, and compassion, and she had discovered that even in the darkest moments there could be light, warmth, and humanity. Before moving on to continue her journey to her relative's home, Maria paused and reflected. She thought about the ranch, the snow, and the quiet strength of the man who had saved her life. She realized that kindness and courage could take many forms, and that even the smallest acts could leave lasting impressions. She made a promise to herself that she would carry these lessons forward, helping others whenever she could, just as rancher number 13 had helped her. As night fell, Maria found a safe place to rest for the evening. She thought back to the warmth of the ranch, the stories of survival and care, and the lessons she had learned about resilience, observation, and humanity. Sleep came easily, and for the first time in many nights it was deep and peaceful. She dreamed of snow-covered fields, warm fires, and a world filled with quiet strength and kindness. In the days that followed, Maria continued her journey, always carrying the memory of the ranch and the man who had opened the door. Every step, every challenge, and every small act of help she encountered reminded her of that night. She understood that life was fragile and unpredictable, but also full of opportunities to make a difference. And she knew that her life had been forever changed by a simple act of kindness, a warm fire, and the quiet strength of rancher number 13. By the time she reached her relative's home, Maria was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the power of human compassion. She shared her story with those around her, recounting not just the fear and struggle of the storm, but also the hope, warmth, and life-changing kindness she had experienced. Her tale was not only about survival in the cold, but about the enduring strength of humanity and the extraordinary impact that one person could have on another. Maria never forgot the ranch or the man who had saved her. She carried the lessons she had learned into every part of her life: the importance of helping others, the value of patience and observation, and the understanding that even in the harshest conditions, there could be warmth, hope, and humanity. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the door that had opened on that snowy night was not just the threshold of a house, but a gateway to a life forever changed by compassion, courage, and quiet kindness.